Well, hello and welcome to another Topher Project interview. My name is Topher Field, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around you. And every now and again, it is my solemn responsibility to bring you a story so gobsmackingly boring, so incredibly arcane, that it will probably be used for centuries to come to help people with insomnia finally go to sleep. Yes, that's right. It's that time again, the time when I talk to an economist. But before you click away, this one really dropped my jaw when I saw it, because I've been told since I was a child that a progressive tax system is right and virtuous and fair, and it's what we ought to have. Now, let's put aside the question of whether or not that's true. That would imply that we have a progressive tax system. That means that as your income goes up, the percentage you pay in tax also goes up. And I was gobsmacked to find out only just recently that we don't even have that. Put aside whether or not it's a good thing, we don't even have one. So here to go through the details with me is the master of insomnia himself, John Humphreys. Welcome to the Topher Project.
Thank you for that glorious introduction, Topher.
I thought you'd appreciate that. For those that don't know, I've known John for a very long time now, and he tolerates me well enough, so I can give him a hard time. John, you brought this to my attention. Now, just because there will be people watching that really don't understand any of this, have never been had it explained to them before, can you talk us through what's happening on this graph? What does this represent?
Yeah, so this is showing the marginal tax rates, and that word marginal does matter here. So it's showing that the tax rate for each person as they earn an extra, say, $1,000, right? So if you have a 30% marginal tax rate, you earn 1,000, you get to keep 700, you give the government 300, right? You give them 30% of that 1,000, which is 300. So this is following what the marginal tax rate is. If you go along the bottom there, the x-axis, the one down the bottom is showing your income. So if your income there is, you see, if your income goes up to about 22.5, it actually is there, it's hard to see on that, then you're paying zero. So you can see the marginal tax rate is zero to start with. And then as you start earning more money, your marginal tax rate goes up. And people think that it goes up to 16%, then 30%, then 37, and then 45, right? That's what we're told the marginal tax rates are.
I'm sorry to interrupt this interview with John Humphreys. Hopefully you are still awake. No, actually, this is really important stuff. I tease him that it's boring, but it is super important. This is the Topher Project. My name is Topher Field, and I am 100% viewer supported. So please help me to keep the Topher Project going by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net, and also by checking out my best-selling books, my multi-award-winning DVD, and my range of different designs in merchandise, in T-shirts and hoodies, all available from goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Thank you for your support and helping me to keep doing interviews like this one with John Humphreys.
As you can see here, if you put together the actual tax rates, factoring in the Medicare levy and the low-income tax offset, what I call the actual tax rates jump around a little bit more haphazardly and a little bit more strangely. And as you've noticed, as I've been old man screaming at the clouds for years now, as you've noticed, there's two spots here where it's actually regressive. So we expect a progressive income tax schedule would you'd look at a graph like this and it would step up. As your income went up, your marginal tax rate would go up. So that's what we expect to see. And when we look at the actual system that applies in Australia, it goes up in several spots there. You see it going up, and then two spots there, one in particular, you see it going down. And the very noticeable one there is the one near the beginning around that $30,000 mark, where you can see that little castle that's sort of built into that graph, which is an inexplicable jump from 16% up to 26% and then back down to 18%. And that jumping from 26 to 18 is kind of weird.
Well, John, the real world impact of this is we're talking here about people that aren't earning a lot of money. These are people that are trying to get themselves, let's say, out of poverty, or they might be people who are just starting out on their careers or returning to work after years or even decades of having been a stay-at-home parent. There's a lot of different people that are really trying to battle their way up from zero effectively for any one of a range of different reasons. And we think, and what I've been told since I was a child, was that our system gives everyone a fair go. It means that as you're a battler starting out, you don't pay any tax at all, and then you start to earn a little bit of money, you pay a little bit of tax, and then those really rich fat cats that are earning, in this graph, $250,000 a year, well, of course, they're going to get stung with lots more tax. And putting aside whether or not that's how it should be, that's how it was explained to me since I was a child. What this graph is saying to me here in the real world is that if you're a battler trying to get back on your feet after taking some kind of a hit or trying to get started as a younger person, you're actually being hit with some kind of a weird almost a punitive tax. I mean, the rate at which that tax rate increases once you actually reach the point where taxes begin, that's like a cliff wall. You could defend a castle with a wall like that.
Yeah, well, so I'd say in defense of the system, it is equal in this sense. Our tax and welfare system screws over everybody. So everybody gets screwed. So you got that level
Everyone's
of equality.
screwed.
But the actual situation for low income people is actually worse than shows on this graph. Now, this graph is just showing the tax side of the equation. As you know, you've got the tax and welfare systems and they interact, right? So you need to look at them together. The problem is if you graph it together, it gets so mind-numbingly complicated that basically no one can see anything I'm talking about. But if you actually factor in, and we've talked about this before, the withdrawal of welfare at the same time as people are paying tax, if you look at both of those together, a lot of those low-income people actually are paying effective marginal tax rates of 80% or above, which is really takes away a lot of the incentive. A lot of people would be better off just not working or very little benefit from working.
To put that in plain English, if they stopped earning, they would still get 80% of the dollars. And I know marginal, et cetera. You know, you as an economist on the inside, you're going to be jumping up and down to want to try and clarify what I'm saying. But effectively, they're earning only 20 cents in the dollar of the money that they're working for, the hours that they're going and doing in a, let's say, packing groceries in a checkout or washing windows or whatever it may be doing. They're only actually getting 20%. Or 20 cents out of every one of those dollars that they're earning within that marginal range where they are simultaneously losing welfare benefits and also being stung with increasing taxes. Is that more or less fair to say?
That's exactly right. And in some cases, it's even worse than that. There are situations where you earn 1,000, you give 1,000 to the government. There are situations where if you earn 1,000, you give 3,000 to the government. And that those situations, people are actually financially better off by refusing to work, refusing to do overtime, refusing to take a promotion. You could be better off by asking your employer to give you a pay cut in some of the places in our tax welfare system because it's such a haphazardly ridiculous system that hurts us. But I mean, the big point here, though, is that that's very specific points where that happens. But there's a very large income range. There's quite a large income range where you are paying prohibitively high tax rates. And more than that, as you said at the beginning of this, in some cases, it's even set up in a regressive way where you are paying some of the highest tax rates, effective marginal tax rates, when you're on relatively low income. So that's just not how you would design a system if you're actually trying to help people work their way out of poverty.
And I think a lot of people don't really necessarily catch the real world impact of this. I'll give one example without saying their name. There's someone that I know who works for themselves. They work very hard. I have a little bit to do with them. I'm a big fan actually of what they do, but they are consciously capping the amount of work that they do because for whatever reason, I'm not quite sure what's going on for them psychologically or in their life. They've determined that they don't want to cross the GST threshold. They don't want to cross the threshold where they're going to have to start charging GST to their clients. And I disagree with that particular perspective, but I do understand it. And they don't want the paperwork. They don't want the registration. They don't want to have to do the BAS statements every 3 months, all of that sort of thing. And I wonder across the Australian economy, people may not know about what you've shown us with this graph consciously, but instinctively they understand that actually if they were to work that little bit harder, they're going to be worse off. And has anyone ever tried to quantify just how much this kind of regression is costing us?
Depends what you mean by us. I mean, it is insanely difficult to unpeel every layer of this. And it's also made more difficult by every different family situation has a slightly different effective marginal tax rate because it interacts differently with your family tax benefit, with your childcare allowances, with your rent assistance, et cetera, et cetera. It's a great way to punish yourself. Try to get to the bottom of it. Give yourself a couple of weeks, and at the end of it, make sure you have lots of whiskey to reward yourself at the end of it. So, but people do look into it. One of the difficulties is it's so complicated that it's hard to explain clearly, and so it's hard to get the idea across very quickly to many people. So there's not much outrage. And part of the job I've set myself, which I've been failing for it years, but hopefully you can help me, is to try and get some of these ideas across in a way that can be easily consumed. And I think if people understood the system better, they would be outraged. They would be clamoring for change. If you'll indulge me 1 second. So that graph before, that little castle we had at the beginning where the tax rates, everyone thinks they're on 16%, and then it jumps up to 26%, that little castle near the beginning of the graph. That, for instance, is created by the fact that the Medicare levy is not 2% on all the money you earn. That's what we're
Okay.
told. That's the simple story. That's what everyone believes the Medicare levy is, 2% on everything you earn. The way it works, looking at the marginal tax rate, is it's 0% up to
Okay.
27,000, right? So you're up to 27,000, you don't have to pay Medicare levy.
No tax.
Then between, that makes sense, right? And then between 27 and 34,000, if you're earning in that bracket, you're paying 10% Medicare levy. That's your marginal rate. And then above that, it's the 2% that everyone thinks it is. And this is that 0 to 10 to 2. And so the latest campaign coming on, this is my plug now. The Australian Taxpayers Alliance, our campaign at the moment.
Go on, have a free kick. Go for it.
The campaign is to try and get rid of this 10% Medicare levy section between 27 and 34,000, where we've got a 10% Medicare levy. We're saying let's bring that down to 2% like the rest of the Medicare levy, like they say it is. Keep the tax-free threshold, because that's good, and then just keep it at 2%. Because keeping this 10% rate, I mean, I know why they do it, but put that aside, keeping this 10% rate, this is an extra burden on the exact people who are already facing these 80% effective marginal tax rates. So that's the first thing. It creates a regressive step in our tax system. And they're all about, like you say, the standard mantra is progressive, progressive, progressive. Then why have this regressive step when you could just not have it? And also this would provide a tax cut to nearly all workers. So 3 benefits from this, right?
This is going to keep me awake at night if I don't ask this question. But then again, if I do ask this question, I think I'm going to regret it. But I'm going to ask it anyway. You said you do understand why they do it, why they have this little band with a 10% effective Medicare levy. Is there a short version? Is there a short answer that's going to help me to understand why they do that?
I can explain it quickly. Whether it's understandable quickly is another question. Look, they're clawing back the benefit, right? So what they give is tax-free threshold, and they want to claw back that tax-free threshold. And so to do that, they need to charge a higher marginal rate to make that tax-free threshold disappear for people on higher incomes. So this is always the problem with clawing back any benefit. It's that you'll notice on that graph, there's actually 2 places where it goes regressive, and both of those are caused by clawing back an earlier benefit. So I would argue just don't claw it back, because when you claw it back, you increase marginal tax rates. And that is the thing that determines incentives. And the government wants to talk about productivity. Here you go, government. If you're serious about it, let's get rid of these regressive steps. It's nominally a left-wing government. So they're supposed to care about poor people. Now we've got 2 regressive steps in our tax system that punish poor people. Let's cut those taxes and get our tax system being closer to what they say they want it to be. And it'll boost productivity. Win, win, win.
Well, John, I thought I had a hard job trying to be a libertarian political commentator and communicator, trying to get Australians to actually care about freedom. But I think you've successfully given yourself an even harder job trying to get Australians to actually understand or listen to you for long enough to understand regressive marginal tax rates in our very, very arcane tax system. I tip my hat to you. That is a courageous way to try and make a difference in the world. I'm very glad to have you on. Thank you for joining me on the Topher Project.
Thank you, Topher.